And she and I have been friends for many, many years, back to our university days. She's garnered a wealth of experience working in different industries over the years. She's currently the executive director at Fontana Ventures, a subsidiary of Animal Care Services Nigeria Limited, where she manages the brand identity with the ultimate goal of maximizing customer perception. She's married with children. So, as I introduce you to our book that we will be discussing today, and the insights learned from the work that Tolu has vigorously done in research and not only the research work, but really curation of all of this work that has been done over the years on nutrition. I'd like to share a glimpse of what that looks like with you. So the book is titled Clean This, Heal This. And please do let me know if you're not able to see my screen. But this book is an excellent resource and it provides very practical guidelines for not only how to manage and improve health, but there are concrete recipes, and there are also research details exclusively presented in the book that are backed by peer-reviewed publications. In the scientific world, we utilize peer-reviewed publications quite extensively because this is work that has been well vetted. This is work that typically scientists and medical professionals have spent years and sometimes decades contributing to. And really, the understanding that you can glean from this piece of work is really fascinating. It spans not only enhancing your understanding of basic things like allergies or childhood development, but even thinking about ADHD, autism, ADD, dyslexia, and a multitude of sorts. We all know that food is an integral part of our humanity, of human survival as we know it. But do you also know that there are specific foods that can be used as medicine? That is our reflecting point for today. So I introduce you to the text that we will be starting with and introduce you to the author, Mrs. Tolulola Olumide. It's such a delight to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me, Mary. It's a pleasure as always. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you
Okay. All
perfectly.
right.
Okay. So in this reflecting moment, I thought it would be best for us to start with the text in the book and for our author today to introduce us to some of the backstory. Again, this book contains not only extensive curated scientific work from the literature, but also a blend of formalized recipes that have specific guidelines. So I wonder if that may be a starting point for us to discuss this morning. So, Sis, if you could please start us there, and then we'll work our way from there to questions and, of course, open forum from the audience.
Thank you again, Mary. I'm so glad to be here. Honestly, it feels like it's this is an initiative that you took and ran with, and you'd been talking about, us getting together to discuss this book. And now that we're here, I'm just fascinated by the fact that we haven't actually done this earlier. This is you've Thank you for the opportunity. So the book is, I'll say, a love child of sorts. It was born out of a need, a personal need, to have a clear understanding of what I could be doing to help my son, who had a diagnosis at the time that he was about 20 months old of autism. It became clear to me quite early enough in the diagnosis that it wasn't just a matter of therapy. Therapy is very important, it's very essential, but we're dealing with something that requires, a lot more depth of intervention. And I realized that if it is true that all disease begins in the gut, then it is true, obviously, that all health too must begin in the gut. And I started to research, how the gut and the brain were connected, and how, just what we eat impacts how we show up and our affect, our presentation. And I realized there was a lot of research connecting autism and better nutrition, ADHD and good nutrition, like improvement in symptoms. And I also realized that there was a lot of research that we weren't getting at the therapy front. A lot of biomedical research that showed that autism, ADHD, and these kind of developmental conditions are actually physiological, not just, psychological. Till today, I think in the Nigerian medical lexicon, autism is filed under psychological, but it's actually physiological. Like it's a whole body disorder that requires intervention in the way that the body is, managed. And so I started doing my research, and over the years, I, obviously started to evolve my son's diet. I saw him begin to show up with a little bit more clarity, function, more. He was more present. He started to do better in school, and I honestly attribute a lot of it to his, much cleaner diet, which is based on the GAPS diet. Um, I came about writing the book about 3 or 4 years ago is when I started that project. When we had a couple of conferences where we had parents, like-minded parents, who made it very clear that there was a gap, for a resource like this. There was room for a resource like this. And so I started putting it together, and the book was launched in 2024. And honestly, there's been a lot of incredible feedback about, how people have received, just some insights from the book that have changed, even if it's just minor one or two day-to-day functions. They've been critical enough changes that, it shows that there's value being out there. And so that's kind of where we are right now, just trying to promote it and make sure that it gets into the hands of mothers who would need a launch pad or a guidebook like this. It's not very easy to do all the research yourself sometimes. And so my goal was to distill as much of the research that I did and put it in, a simple guidebook like this. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And it's such a reflecting point. And there's so much, so many nuggets in the book. And I know we've had some folks that joined right as you were sharing your thoughts on how the project came to be birthed. So I want to welcome those that joined us a little bit after we had started. You're most welcome. Shortly, I'm going to be asking a question I'd love for you all to post in the chat. And full disclaimer, you cannot utilize Google for the next set of questions I'll be asking. So I'm a professor, so I'm going to be a little bit strict. So no Google searches. Now, question to the audience. How many bacteria, if you were to quantify it, so I'm looking for a quantifiable number, how many do we have in our gut? If you were to guess a number, and maybe you know the number, but how many bacteria do we have in our gut? So if you could chat your numbers to me, that will be great. And if you joined us a
I'm
little bit,
guessing I'm disqualified.
yes, you cannot because you already know the answer. So,
Yeah.
so the author is excluded from this exam exercise. Okay, thank you so much. 1 million. Keep them coming. I see 1 million, millions, maybe billions. Excellent, excellent. Keep those numbers coming. Millions, okay. Keep the numbers coming. Unaccountable, okay? Uncountable, uncountable. Thank you for that. Uncountable. Excellent. And if you hadn't yet joined on the previous question, I had posed a question about nutrition. On a scale of 1 to 10, how rigorous would you say you are with employing nutrition guidelines for every meal you prepare at home? On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being most rigorous and 1 being less. So we got some numbers earlier that were 4, 7. I think I saw 6 was a number as well. So please do keep those numbers coming because we'll be reflecting on those numbers as well. Additionally, I'll be doing a random draw for copies of the book. So stay tuned for that towards the end of our event shortly. Okay, so we have millions, we have uncountable, maybe billions, 30 million, okay, 30 trillion, 40 trillion. Okay, so Tolu, how much bacteria do we have in our gut?
Let's see who said 30 to 40 trillion. Kafilat. Kafilat, you are in the right wheelhouse. It's about between 30 to 100 trillion bacteria in our gut. So a lot. Yeah.
Yes, quite a lot. Quite a lot. So I'm going to read an excerpt from the book. This was actually from page 45 in the text, where Tolu discusses probiotics. And I know many of you may have gone into the store. You see there's a large shift now with probiotics, prebiotics. What does that all mean? What does that all mean? So probiotics, and this is in the text that Tolu has curated, but probiotics are microorganisms that are considered to be beneficial to the human host. They support immunity, they stimulate the body's own natural defenses. So our body has its own immune sets of cells, T cells and B cells. So specifically, T cells are the cells that are concerned with longer term adaptation mechanisms. B cells are important for things like when we get our vaccines, they build antibodies, they're very, very important over the years. So these probiotics are microorganisms that work off of those pre-existing immune cells for defense mechanisms. The other thing that is very fascinating about these is that they stimulate the body's natural defenses by lining the intestines with a protective layer. And that protective layer includes friendly bacteria. So I want to reflect on that for just a moment. And Tolu, if you could please walk us through the logic of the gut and brain connection, because that's really the key linkage there with the foods, how they're processed, defense mechanisms, and linking back to the gut and the brain.
Thank you, Annie Mary. So when you look at the way that the body is made, there is a line between the gut and the brain called the vagus nerve. Now, the direction of communication between that line, between the brain and the gut, the direction of communication is actually, I'm sure most people would guess from the brain to the gut, but it's not. It's from the gut to the brain, which means that the gut is doing the bulk of the communication. About 80% of the biodirectional communication is coming from the gut to the brain, which means that the gut is in charge. The gut is telling the brain what to do, how to show up, how to behave. So that tells you about the impact of what happens in the gut. What happens in the gut does not stay in the gut. It affects the whole body. So that is why the gut is actually referred to as the second brain in the body, because it sends the most essential communication between the body and obviously from the gut to the brain. So that's why it's very important that what is happening in the gut is very mindfully addressed, because we're not just left to our own devices when you're eating, whatever you're putting in your body, because of the way that the gut has so much influence on the rest of the body. It's very essential that what is going into the body is, feeding the body to nourish the brain intentionally. So
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And I'm going to stay there for just a moment and touch on how gut inflammation, how does that impact health? So this notion of gut inflammation, what does that actually look like? And how does that impact health?
okay. So when the gut is inflamed, there's something in the gut called the intestinal junction, the intestinal tight junctions. When your gut becomes inflamed, those tight junctions loosen. And that's what they call a leaky gut. So when there's inflammation in the gut, it results in a leaky gut. When there's a leaky gut, the food that you eat no longer stays within the body. it penetrates through those intestinal tight junctions, which are no longer tight. It goes through those tight junctions and it doesn't politely just restrain itself into the body. It goes into the brain, which is what ends up creating stuff like brain fog and, hyperactivity and, so many of these symptoms as a result of the leaky gut, as a result of what is happening when the intestinal tight junctions are, compromised shows up in the body, like what is happening when the compromise happens and how the body responds to it. So when there's inflammation, leaky gut occurs. When there's leaky gut, everything that goes into your body is no longer restrained in all the places they're supposed to be. It allows communication into the brain that is not right. Like it's not the sort of communication that the brain is expecting to have. So it creates, like I said, a lot of brain fog, a lot of the symptoms that we see in ADHD and autism, hyperactivity, laughing to yourself, uncontrollable laughing, poor sleep and all that. And when there is inflammation, when there is leaky gut, it affects the way that we think. It affects our mood. It affects the way that, we present every day. In fact, if, it's not even just only people who have developmental delays, even you and me, when we have intestinal tight junction malfunctions, it affects the way that we think strategically, because the prefrontal cortex is affected. That's what helps us to think. That's what helps us with planning. That's what helps to regulate mood and, all these activities that require a lot of, brain work. And so when there's that compromise, everything is affected. Everything is affected. And so that's why it's very important that there's inflammation is kept at a minimum, if not eliminated.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Gut is the second brain.
So,
And next we move to GAPS inspired. GAPS inspired. What do you think is a key feature that perhaps when we try to implement nutrition, the nutrition industry is a billion-dollar industry. We see all sorts of new marketed products. So, what do
mhm.
you think that fundamentally is being missed along the way of nutrition and really trying to think about holistic approaches and cleaning, keeping the bodies clean, keeping our bodies clean because our bodies are a temple. And so
Mm.
when we reflect on gaps, what does gaps inspired mean? And what do you think are some lessons, takeaways that perhaps could be learned from nutrition and how to do it well?
Thank you. So GAPS is actually the acronym is Gut and Psychology Syndrome. It was originated by a Dr. Natasha McBride. So she has a very dense book that goes into what the whole protocol is about and, the diet, like it's a whole volume on, it's a very intense scientific volume. But the main idea of the GAPS diet is that you have a diet that takes away a lot of processed foods and introduces a lot of clean foods, what is produced by the earth, what is found naturally occurring, as opposed to like your packaged foods and all that stuff. And so that's basically what GAPS is. The thing that people do wrong, I would say, with GAPS and generally with other diets when they're trying to clean their gut or improve their diets, is they focus more on what they're eliminating from the diet. Okay, I'm going to stop eating this. I'm going to eat less of this. I'm going to eat less of this. But the truth is, what you introduce, you know, into the body at the same time to repair the body. So it's not just about removal. Focus also as you're removing, which is very essential, focus also on repairing what you're introducing into the body to now go and heal what has been damaged. And so I think what we're finding is a lot of focus on, eliminating this, eliminating that. And that's very essential, but that's only half of the work. You have to now figure out what we're going to be reintroducing into the body to help to do the repairs and to help to, bring the body back to its most, its best natural state. So I'd say that's the biggest mistake that people make is focusing on removal versus removal and repair. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay.
Mhm.
And as we're thinking about cleaning the bodies, I'm going to read a another section from Tolu's book. And for the audience, if you have questions, please do feel free to chat the questions. You can also unmute yourself to ask. A word about water, and this is literally the title of that section in Tolu's book. A word about water. So we all know that water is really essential. It's the most important essential nutrient that the human body needs, and nothing comes close to second. For many reasons, children are more susceptible to dehydration, and this research has shown, than adults. And some symptoms of mild dehydration include dry, cracked lips, thirst, drowsiness or tiredness, moodiness or irritability, muscle weakness, dizziness or lightheadedness, headache, and slightly sunken eyes. In children with ASD or similar conditions, these symptoms can easily be missed due to language delays or inadequate means of expression. As a matter of fact, some children on the spectrum don't recognize the sensation of thirst and therefore never ask for drinks. And this makes them especially susceptible to dehydration. So that is a perfect reflecting point on the importance of water. So I wondered, Tolu, if we could just stop there for a moment and reflect on this, how this particular section came about in the way you formulated it, in the way you put it together. There's also a lovely chart that says how much water should your child drink. So just
Yeah.
as a point of reference for boys, ages 9 to 13 years old should be 2 to 4 liters per day, which is 10 cups per day. And then for girls 9 to 13 years of age, it's 2.1 liters per day, which is 9 cups per day. So it's broken down in age groups and also for boys and girls because we recognize that there are also gender-based differences in health as
Yeah.
well.
So what is the question?
Oh, yes. So I was asking if you could reflect for a moment on how you molded this particular section in your book together and
Okay.
drafted up the tables and some of your thoughts and your logic behind just the overall description and also
All right.
including the children on the spectrum that they essentially may go through dehydration and not be able to express themselves. So maybe if there are some additional indicators that parents can be watching out for and lessons learned from that as well.
Thank you. So yeah, I think talking about water, there are different chapters in the book that talk about essential things. And of course, there's no way you talk about essential things when we're talking about nutrition without talking about water. And what the finding was, as you have rightly highlighted, is that a lot of children with developmental needs or delays also have a problem articulating or expressing or requesting, and not even realizing, that they're missing some of these things. They usually there might be some um, there's deprivation because of the language delay. So one of the main things that you end up finding that children are not getting, in addition to not having proper nutrition, is they're not getting, a proper liquid intake, um, particularly water. Children on the spectrum, you find that they have a lot of addiction to sugars, addiction to, drinks that would stimulate, like, your carbonated drinks and all that stuff, but they're not getting enough water. Those drinks don't hydrate the body. Those drinks just, quench thirst very, very temporarily, but, very soon you're right back to needing the water. And so we find that there's a need to be proactive about making sure that children are getting water. And I talked about it in my book because I felt like there are practical ways to do this. People say, oh, my son doesn't like water, my daughter doesn't like water. Well, he needs the water. She needs the water. So it had to be an essential part of the book because when you talk about like some of the symptoms, children are showing up with dry and cracked lips, drowsy and tired. You see a child who's drowsy and tired, you don't initially think maybe he's thirsty. You see a child who is moody or cranky, you don't think, oh, maybe he's thirsty. Somebody, is showing certain symptoms, with the sunken eyes, for example. You're not thinking, oh, perhaps he needs water. But the truth is, something as simple as water could be what is missing, you know. So at the end of the day, we had to focus on water as well, because there's no point talking about all these other measures and all these other things that you need to do without, highlighting water. And of course, we talk about how to, to make sure that they're getting the water. One of the ways is a lot of children with, unique learning support needs, or, support needs, have attraction to routine. They have their own things that they like to use. This is my favorite cup. This is my favorite, bottle. This is my. So you allow them to choose their own favorite cup or their own favorite bottle, or whatever, utensil it is that they like. They like color green. Give them options that are green. Give them, just try to make it easier for them and make it easier for yourself. And so by the time they've identified a vessel that they like, then you can give them the assignment of going to fetch the water themselves. So if you have this task that is attached to meeting this essential need, then it makes it um more likely that it will get done. So if it's timed, maybe at 9 o'clock, go fetch your water. And, then at 12, go fetch another bottle. At 2 p.m., go fetch another bottle. It's task activated. And so you have kids going and doing the fetching of the water. And then, when you fetch the water, what do you do with it? You drink it. So those are some of the things that we put in the book, just to have parents just assist and support with ways to make sure that they're getting enough water intake for the kids. And also just to make sure that we're not missing that essential ingredient, when we're looking at all the other critical things. So
Yes, I love that you included very tangible steps that parents can take, and that actually segues perfectly to a question that I hear parents talk about when we're talking about nutrition and foods, and how children eat, and ch children's health in general. Some parents may say, they have a very choosy or picky eater. So I wonder if you can for a moment comment on some of the work in your book that addresses strategies for choosy eaters, picky eaters, concrete strategies for parents that are trying to adjust for the child and to make sure they're eating well, but maybe they
yeah.
have a child that's a picky eater.
So for picky eaters, it's more or less kind of the same structure, like the same idea is creating tasks around meal times, making mealtime a time that is interesting and fun for the child, something that they look forward to. So, for example, let's see where we talk about this in the book. You have children who have difficulty with certain, textures or certain, foods. There are ways that you introduce those textures to them gradually and slowly. When it's time for meal times as a family, you can designate, a seating position for a child. If maybe there's a child who likes to face the television, hey, whatever you need to do in order to get the child to be present and attentive at the table, you can put them in that position so they're facing the television. Of course, gradually over time, you would, rotate them away from there. But to start, when they're still at that height of pickiness, that's one of the things that you could do. Make them, put them in a place where they're comfortable. You ease them into meal times. So you have children who are scared of food sometimes. They only ever eat one particular food. They're not interested in food, in fact, because, it's every time it's a chore. And then you have sensory issues. A lot of times they're dealing with sensory issues. So eating is almost like it's a battle. So you have to ease children into it. one of the things you do maybe at the beginning, you take them together, take them with you to the grocery store, shop with them, and let them pick the foods, let them touch the foods in the supermarket at the, at the grocery aisle. Oh, look at this. What is this? And of course, by the time they put it in the basket, when they get home, it's not a surprise to them. See it. By the time you start preparing the food, you can involve them. Come, we're going to cook this thing that we bought together. And you just kind of make them a part of the process. That eases them into the whole preparation process. Not that they sit at the table and then they see this food in front of them. No, they were part of the process of creating it. And, that also makes them a little bit more, less reticent about wanting to eat the food. Make sure, first of all, that there are no allergies. That's one of the things that we also try to eliminate at the beginning. If you can go and do something like an organic acid test to make sure, find out what your child is allergic to, what they're not allergic to, that is obviously, that would be a great thing to do at the beginning of the process. But once that's eliminated, you want to make sure that you are making the children part of the process of introducing the foods to themselves. You gradually expose them to new foods. So by the time maybe this week you brought in a new ingredient, don't bring in a new one tomorrow. Give it a few days, let them get familiar with this, let them trust this new food you've introduced. And in a week or 2 weeks, you take them through the whole exciting process again. We go shopping together and, oh, look at this. We discover this new food. You prepare the food together and gradually you start introducing these foods one at a time. Another thing that makes it very helpful to do it that gradually is that you also avoid allergies, you avoid irritants. When there are issues, like maybe a child is reacting to certain foods, you're able to identify it and discover it early enough. It's not that you've introduced 10 different things and now you don't know which one the child is reacting to. But if you're introducing one thing at a time, every week, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, when there's a manifestation of, a symptom or a reaction, you're easily able to isolate, what it was that caused that. So, just encourage the child to explore and play and get messy with food, especially a child that has sensory issues or is reluctant to, touch certain kinds of food. You know, turn it into a play. Let them get, acclimated to it, touching it, touching it, touching it. And after a while, before you know it, all right, well, let me taste it, and just ease them into it. The point is you want to make sure that the child is trusting enough of the process, and once they're trusting of the process, it just becomes easier and easier to introduce new foods to them. So picky eaters can actually become people who are getting proper nourishment if you're ready to take the time to, help them overcome that. So, and there are obviously other steps. There are quite a few other steps in the book, but all of it revolves around making sure that the process is one that is gradual. So
I love that. Absolutely love the gradual process, involving them in that process, helping them to be a part of the experience, because really that the food is that experience, culinary. It's also a cultural experience too, because they can see different types of foods. We have a question in the chat from the audience. And again, please feel free to chat your questions, keep them coming, and also feel free to unmute if you'd like as well. Is there a connection? So, question from the audience, is there a connection between processed sugar and inflammation? If yes, how do we avoid it?
So there's definitely a connection between processed sugar and inflammation. And this is even for us neurotypical people. It's not just, it's general across the board. We all want to eliminate or reduce our sugar intake. But yes, sugar is um, it's something of an excitotoxin. Like it irritates the gut lining. And so, of course, anything that's irritating the gut lining is also going to be affecting the intestinal tight junctions that I talked about earlier. And it's basically the same cycle. Once you have anything that causes inflammation, intestinal tight junctions are compromised, food gets into the bloodstream, it doesn't stay in the bloodstream, it's carried to the brain fog, all sorts of symptoms. And so sugar is one of those. When you list all the different most inflammatory foods, sugar is top on the list. Now, how do you avoid it? It has to be intentional. It has to be deliberate. You have to ease yourself off of it. Either you do cold turkey and cut it out completely and replace it with alternatives, which, in any sort of dietary protocol, it has to be about alternatives because it's not just about eliminating things and then people going back to them because they don't have a choice, but it's about introducing better alternatives. So honey is a better alternative to sugar, even though honey too has its own potential if it's overeaten. Anything in moderation, anything that's not eating in moderation can cause inflammation. But honey is very healthy. Honey is healing. And honey it's quite difficult to abuse honey. So honey is an excellent replacement for sugar, absolutely. We're looking at stuff like stevia, not Truvia and all these other um, um, I'll say fake stevia alternatives, but the natural plant stevia, the stevia plant itself. So it has to be something that is sourced directly from the stevia plant, not the alternatives. That also is a very, very good replacement for sugar. Um, Obviously, you have like your dates, you know, coconuts. There are quite a few things that you can actually use to replace sugar, but the objective is to eliminate gradually. Gradually is always very important because you want sustainability. You don't want to do something that will shock your system and cause it to go into what's that thing called when your body has a reaction, when there's a quick change to the system. You don't want the body to go through withdrawals, exactly. You want the body to gradually acquire the taste for the new thing, to gradually get used to the new changes that are taking place. And then, sustainability is key. So yes, sugar is an inflammatory product. It's one of the top ones. And the only thing you can do is just try to reduce your intake and get to a point where perhaps you could eliminate it. So me that I'm talking, I have not been able to eliminate sugar. I have no plans to eliminate it, but keep it at a very, very, very moderate level. So I hope that answers the question.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And as the audience is also percolating on everything that we're sharing, I know there's quite a lot of information. Again, being inundated as we all are with new, the best or the newest inventions for this and that, and also food. The food industry has also played a huge role in that. I want to take us to a wonderful section in Tolu's book where she talks about specific vitamins and essential nutrients. Specifically here, vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin D for autism. In the section here, this is on page 160, Tolu. I know you have a book in front of you as well. So here, vitamin C for autism. Some children with autism may have a vitamin C deficiency. Vitamin C has been shown to have a calming effect on behavior in humans. Scientists hypothesize that vitamin C has these effects because it affects the brain's response to an important neurotransmitter, dopamine. Another explanation of this is the antioxidant properties. So earlier, Tolu mentioned cytotoxicity, which plays a role in inflammation, and that can lead to a whole other set of cyclical things that happen physiologically, right? So our bodies work based off of cues and receptors. It's similar to our pain, if you touch something and you feel that it's hot, that's actually a nerve response, and you'll lift off your fingers from that. So our bodies respond to a whole host of neurotransmitters as well. So vitamin C, specifically dopamine. Now, vitamin A, in her book, she goes on to describe that vitamin A, which can be found in animal foods, oily fish, cod liver oil, is one of the best forms for that. The digestive system problems and vitamin A deficiency are a somewhat chicken and egg relationship. Poor digestion causes vitamin A deficiency, but conversely, vitamin A deficiency can also cause digestive problems. So it's a relationship that is it's linked and has that chicken and egg outcome. Another critical function of vitamin A is role in immunity. We talked a little bit about immunity earlier. And then vitamin D for cognitive performance. Vitamin D is also being increasingly recognized as a necessary neurosteroid with various actions in the brain. And there have been results of tests that have shown memory, locomotor skills, anxiety behavior, and that cod liver oil helped prevent cognitive impairments. This was done in an animal model, and we do believe that this translates similarly to what we may see in humans. And so, touching on the roles of those vitamins, I wonder if Tolu, if you could comment on that as well.
Okay. So generally, supplementation, I think I'll actually piggyback on the question also in the chat. I don't know if you noticed somebody had asked about
Okay, perfect,
um
perfect. Yes.
yeah, so I think it's a nice piggyback. So basically supplements are essential because even for neurotypical people, we're not getting enough of the vitamins and the nutrients and that we need from foods. We're not eating enough of those foods to get the vitamins from them. So that is why supplementation is such a huge thing, and that is why it's so essential. Um, One of the things that is discovered at the beginning of this dietary protocols for a child, particularly maybe if you have tested them, is what their deficiencies are. So before you start supplementing anything, you want to first of all know what the deficiency is. What is lacking? Is this child not getting enough of? First of all, that, and then second of all, what currently is their diet? So if their diet obviously does not feed to nourish certain, to feed to provide certain of those nutrients, then of course, then you want to introduce a diet that is targeted towards those deficiencies. But the main thing about supplements are essential to provide what we're not going to be able to get in food, no matter how much we're eating. For example, if you wanted to get the amount of vitamin C that you're supposed to um, have in a day, you would have to eat literally about 30 oranges, in addition to certain other vitamin C, high vitamin C foods. Nobody's eating 30 oranges, so supplementation is essential. But I can't, the main thing that you have to do as a parent or even for your own self is what am I deficient in? What foods am I not getting enough of? And then that is what will help to guide how you decide or determine what supplementation is required. But supplementation is essential. A lot of people, you hear the myth, a lot of people saying, if you're eating enough of these foods, then you don't need supplements. But you can't get enough supplements from food. I mean, you can't get enough of the nutrients from food. That's why supplementation is very important. So
Yes, thank you so much for that, Tolu, and thank you for the question as well. Keep the questions coming in. Mr. Shegun, thank you for that. I wanted to just read from Tolu's book on page 164, where she talks a little bit about supplementation. It goes to the point that she just made that while supplementation is a great and often essential option, it's not a replacement for a wholesome, nutrient-dense diet or quality time spent in nature. Um,
absolutely.
and it also goes into the section where you talk about omega-3 essential fatty acids. Getting a good quality brand of omega-3 essential fatty acid is essential. And there are many good quality effective brands out there, but just do your careful research to find what may work best for your child. And as usual, check with your child's primary care physician before starting any course of medications or supplementation. Of course, but research does show that these fatty acids have effectively reduced or corrected learning and sleeping disorders and hyperactivity in children with ADD, ADHD, autism, and other conditions, and generally improve their symptoms. Tolu, I wonder if you could please share. There was a story that you were telling me about of a child that had maybe issues with sleeping. And the parent was able to utilize some of the tips from your book, and that helped the child, and now the child is able to sleep very well. So I wonder if you can comment on that use case example, and maybe any other use case examples that you know of for us today as well.
Okay. So that'll actually take us to another supplement, which is magnesium. So we're talking specifically about sleep. Um, Magnesium is a calming nutrient, and it's also not naturally occurring in the body. It requires, um, you know, dietary concentration or supplementation. So the story that I told you was a family member who had a son who is on the spectrum and has a severe diagnosis and very hyper, always on the go, always just hyperactive. Once his father introduced magnesium to him, in different forms too, not just oral. He started to see a calmer child. Now, talk about different forms. Magnesium is one of those nutrients that can actually be benefited from topically as well. So while you're introducing like maybe oral capsules for the child, you can also use magnesium in their bath, as part of a calming nighttime routine. You can put it on their creams, so you can actually melt some of those, magnesium salts into their creams, put it on their body at night, put it under their feet in particular, because those are the most sensitive areas where there's, ease of penetration, where it goes into the body and circulates. And so he started doing that for his son. And within a few days, he started to see him sleep at night. That was one of the things that was missing. You have a child who is hyperactive all day, and then at night he's still not sleeping. So there was a lot of damage that was getting done in his body because sleep is where the repairing takes place. There was no opportunity for his body to repair itself, from the damage that had been done in the course of the day. And so it was very critical to him to do something for his child that would help him to sleep. And so in that case, the supplement that came in handy for him was magnesium. And like I said, there are various ways to use it. Omega-3 is very, very essential because one of the things that the brain needs is fat, and the most nourishing types of fat, because it actually nourishes the brain. Fat actually nourishes the brain, and your brain is made up of fat. And so when you have omega-3s, it actually helps to affect the functioning of the neurotransmitters in the body, and it sends positive signals into the brain. It helps to calm the body. It helps to produce serotonin. There's so many positive functions of omega-3, and omega-3 is one of those things that is so naturally occurring. So supplementation is very crucial, but you can find it in a lot of our foods, in mackerel, fish, different kinds of seafood. You can find it in nuts and seeds. You can find it in certain kinds of plant oils. You can find it in other fortified foods where you just fortify naturally with the omega-3s, certain kinds of eggs. So omega-3 is very, very accessible. And as essential as it is, it's a good thing that it's very accessible, even without supplementation. But supplementation takes it to the next level to make sure that the child or you yourself are getting enough of it. So,
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Tolu. And again, in the chat, keep the questions coming. In a couple of things we'll be doing here in the next few moments is doing a random draw. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for that question. Stella says, what would you recommend for a child who is constantly having all kinds of skin, rash, breakout, and returning cold sore?
so the first thing that I would recommend is the organic acid test. The organic acid test, it's a deep dive into the child to find out what is happening with this child. What are the deficiencies? What is the child overloaded with? What are the allergies that are bothering this child? What are their predispositions to certain foods? What is lacking? What is excess? The organic acid test is very, very, very critical. It helps to discover stuff like if the child has, too much lead in their system, if the child has, yeast excess, like a yeast overload, just so many things, because these things, how they show up is on the skin, for example. So if you have a child who is repeatedly having all these rashes and, is prone to cold sores, there is something going on internally that needs to be addressed with diet, of course. But even before you can diagnose, or before you can even prescribe a diet, you have to know what is happening. What's missing, what are the deficiencies, what are the overloads, what's happening. So I think what I would recommend for this person is to please do a little bit more research about the organic acid test. There are hospitals here in Nigeria that can facilitate it. And it's a deep dive into what is going on with the child. It's pages and pages of information, and it shows you exactly what the child has going on within their body. And it's the first step into diagnosing, deficiencies and stuff, and into prescribing a diet, supplement, and whatever the next course of action would be. So I recommend organic acid test. So,
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that, Tolu. And I'm just going to add there's a portion in Tolu's book. This is on page 174 and 175 that talks about the side effects of and signs of toxicity, acne, skin rashes, allergies, arthritis, joint pain, autoimmune disorders, cardiovascular disease, chronic fatigue, diabetes, diarrhea, fibromyalgia, hormone imbalance, inflammatory disorders, IBS, neurological disorders, obesity as well. So this has to do with the process of detoxification and elimination. And also Tolu does an excellent job describing methylation and sulfation in the book as well. And this is actually important because research has shown on estimate between 79 and 92% of autistic children are classified as under methylators. So this is an important reflecting point, and I think speaks to the question that was posed earlier. And so thank you for that. We have a question that says, can you describe what organic acid test is? So I think Tolu was describing that it's a deep dive into everything physiologically taking place with the child. And I know that there are medical centers that can help with performing the test. Perhaps it's one of the tests that you may have to ask for. It's not typically inclusive in the standard panel of tests, right, Tolu? I think this is one that you would have to specifically request for, but perhaps you
yes.
can comment on your experiences there.
Yes, it's one that you would have to actually specifically request. It's not your everyday common test. It's not your regular blood test. It is a test that you have to actually request. I know, like I said, that a few medical centers here facilitate, and that's why I didn't say that they perform the test. They facilitate the test. So what they'll do is they'll collect all the things that they're supposed to collect, blood samples, fecal matter, saliva, all the samples that are supposed to be acquired. And then they will help you send it to the laboratories that will do the testing. But it's called an organic acid test. If you go to any medical center worth their salt, they will know what the next step is. And you could also just maybe do a little bit of research to find out who is able to handle that in Lagos, Nigeria. I know Premier Hospital, they were able to at least help us read, the results of the test and work through it. But it's something that's quite accessible. If you just do a little research and follow the rabbit trail, you'll be able to get a test done, in a short time. So.
Thank you so much for that, Tolu. I'm sharing a piece of information here just as we're wrapping up in the next few minutes for our event today. I'm also going to post the link to this in the chat so that you all can have a reference for that. So, two tasks that we're going to do really quickly. I'd love for you all to comment when. If you'd like to be entered in the random draw, we're going to have a random draw here in the next 30 seconds or thereabout. So comment win if you'd like to be entered in that random draw to receive a copy of the book. And secondly, Do peruse all of this information that we've been talking about today is condensed for you. So you can go to the Collective Hub website, www.dreniyogundeji.com, and have all of these resources. That is one of the things that our hub is passionate about is to connect the resources, very important and critical resources and timely resources. So strongly encourage you to do that. And please do subscribe. And as we continue this journey of more understanding and just being able to pass across this important information and very, very critical sets of work that has been shared with our author, by our author today. So I'm going to check in the chat here. I see several people have commented win. So I'm going to do the random draw at this time. So here's your last opportunity to get in if you'd like to be entered in the draw. And then we'll hand it over to Lou to give us her closing remarks. And we'll continue our discussions, of course, online. So if you subscribe, you can continue to post your thoughts, post questions, perhaps questions you thought of after the fact. You can still post them, and Tolu will be able to respond to you and point you to additional resources. So I'm going to check here on those that commented that they would like to be entered in the random draw. So our winner here is Tokes. So, Tokes, if you can chat to let me know if you're still online, you are our winner. So,
Yeah.
so congratulations, and please do send a message with your address so that we can make sure that you receive a copy of the book. Okay, we certainly want to make sure you have that resource for you. So. Thank you again so much for all of the contributors. Any last few questions? Anybody have a question that you just want to get in before we close our session? So I'll give you 10 seconds to either speak up or chat. If not, we will close up and we'll continue offline for our conversations offline. Okay, so Tolu, over to you. Any closing remarks, final takeaways from the book and what people should be expecting when they get a copy of it, and any other thoughts there?
Yeah, I'll start by just saying congratulations to everybody in this chat, because obviously this is a first step or a next step into, better health, either for yourself or your charge, your ward, your child, So thank you for actually taking this step to try to at least, know how to improve yourself or your child. I would say that it is essential. It's the essential first step in any healing journey is nutrition. Particularly for children on the spectrum with different sort of, disabilities or developmental disorders, there's a lot of external therapy that goes on. A lot of investment is put into, trying to help the children, schools and, learning support. And like I said, therapies, occupational therapy, physical therapy, verbal behavior. There's so much that is put into all that. But a lot of that is futile if you're not addressing what is going on in the body. And so I think that a book like this would be basically a guide, a support, like a distillation of information that would at least help you to know how to begin to address that aspect of, what is going on with the child. But they go hand in hand. There's no point wasting money, and I say wasting on therapy if you're not addressing what's going on in the body, because the child would not be as receptive to learning, if their minds, their brains, their, gut is not being balanced, it's not being addressed, it's not being cared for. What is happening with the therapy is just you're just banging and banging and banging away at a sick child. So physiologically we have to address what is going on in the body, and then we add the therapies as, the the additions, the add-ons. So again, thank you for taking the step in acknowledging that nutrition is essential. Like I said earlier, Socrates said all disease begins in the gut, and it follows to reason that all health begins in the gut. And I believe that this book will support you on your journey to learn how to, improve gut health for overall improvement of the body. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm just wanting to share a link. I've posted a link to Tolu's book. It's on Amazon. It's available as an e-version or paperback. And I've also posted the link for you in the chat. It's also linked at our Inspired Collective Hub. That was the link I shared earlier, www.dreniyogundeji.com. And please do connect with us. We'd love to continue the conversation offline. And we're so delighted to have had you on this event today. I want to say a big thank you. Thank you to Mrs. Tolulola Olumide. What a pleasure. Always great to connect with you, our dear sister, and wishing you all a splendid rest of your weekend and a healthy 2026. And we shall stay connected. Remember, we are stronger together. God bless you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Annie Mary.
Oh,
Appreciate
thank
this
you, sisters.
opportunity. Thank
Thank
you.
you all. Have a great
Bye,
rest of the day.
everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.